All right, let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to kind of handicap where we are at in the college football season. You know, a lot of people said before the season started they were sick of the same 4 or 5 teams. Well, we have some major movement. Want to discuss playoff implications, go through each conference, talk about playoff odds for certain teams. There's some really odd and rare scenarios setting up. The biggest thing we got to talk about, the Clemson Tigers eliminated from the college football playoff. 4 weeks into the season, we are not even into October, and Clemson, who, what have they made the last 6 or 5 straight college football playoffs? They're out. So that is a major change. The other big change, Ohio State, they are hanging on kind of by a thread right now. I haven't watched, every snap of Ohio State, but I've watched a lot of Ohio State, and they simply are, horrifically coached, very poorly coached team. I would be shocked if they came out of the Big Ten completely unscathed. I think they lose a game in Big Ten play, and they would be out. But just looking at this overall thing, I want to quickly point out, I don't know if I'm blocking this. I don't think I am. Take a look at the playoff odds for Georgia and frickin' Alabama right now. 84 and 82%. So that's crazy. And then you've got Oklahoma still at 52. I'm not buying it. This is the FPI, so they really don't overreact. But to me, Oklahoma, the way they're playing, the Big 12, it's hit or miss. I'll say that. We'll see what Texas can do. They've obviously got the neutral site game against Oklahoma. But Oklahoma, I'm waiting. Like last week, I thought was the week with Oklahoma where they were going to really break out. It's not happening this year. Spencer Rattler, maybe it still does. It's not like Rattler's a first-year starter. He's got experience. You would think this Oklahoma offense would come together. I will say they're 4-0. That's the main thing that you got to be happy about compared to Ohio State and Clemson. But just looking at the overall setup, I would just want to quickly go conference by conference and talk about the possible playoff teams right now. So, the ACC is eliminated from the college football playoff. Again, it's Clemson, and they lost 2 games. FPI still has them ranked 5th. That's mainly due to them valuing their close loss to Georgia, who is currently FPI number 1. So if you lose by 7 to the number 1 team in the nation, the computers really aren't going to punish you. That's the FPI's thinking in terms of that. But don't pay attention to they're not the 5th best team in college football. They're really not. I think Clemson probably finishes the year 9-3. They're going to lose probably one more game. They do have a great defense, but that defense lost some significant members. Will Shipley also got injured, I saw. He's out 3 to 4 weeks. But there's really not much to talk about. Pitt, they have a decent quarterback who's playing really well right now. NC State, they upset Clemson, but I don't see much there. North Carolina has Sam Howell and nobody else. I guess you can say Josh Downs, but other than that, Miami, they're already 2-2. They already have 2 losses. Wake Forest, nice little start, 4-0. I don't expect that to really mount to anything. Same thing with Boston College, nice little start, 4-0. That's kind of disrespectful. Boston College, 4-0, and they're ranked 46th. I guess that's just how the FBS is. So the ACC is out, right? So we understand that. The ACC is out. Let's go to the American. We're going to go to the American, and I'm not saying this is going to, I'm definitely not saying this has a high chance of happening, but if there was a year for a non-Power 5 team to make the current college football playoff, and I say current because I expect it to expand to 8, at least 8, probably 12 teams by 2025, by the time Oklahoma and Texas join the SEC. But if there was a year for a non-Power 5 to crash the party, it would be this year, and it would be the University of Cincinnati. This game for Cincinnati against an undefeated Notre Dame, a Notre Dame team I think is weaker than people actually, kind of have them. They're undefeated. They beat Wisconsin. A lot of that was flukiness. I'm not going to say they didn't deserve to beat Wisconsin because they did, but scoring those 31 points in the fourth quarter where you get 2 pick sixes and a punt return for a touchdown or whatever, that's fluky. It was a close game. It ended up being a blowout, and people are like, wow, Notre Dame's really good. They're really not that good. The point of it is Cincinnati not only needs to beat Notre Dame, they need to make a statement. They need to put an exclamation point this weekend. They travel into Indiana. It's an away game. They're 2-point favorites. Go in and win 35-14. If you go do that against an I think an overrated Notre Dame team, but they are undefeated. So that's really good for, Cincinnati. Go do that. The narratives will start mounting that Cincinnati should make the college football playoff. You got to beat them. You got to beat them by 21. Go out and destroy them. Put an exclamation point. Make people create the narrative that Cincinnati could be a playoff team. All the other teams, SMU, they have no defense. They are 4-0. UCF lost their starting quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, unfortunately. That was a good UCF. Dylan Gabriel's a really good quarterback. They would have done really well in the American. That's unfortunate. Memphis, they have great. A lot of these teams have really bad defenses, I feel like, in the American, but there's really no one else to talk about. Navy is really bad this year. So the American, you're looking at Cincinnati, not a great schedule. You need to crush Notre Dame. They're vulnerable. They're not as good as their record says they are. They did get a big win last week, crushed them, and then we'll talk. Cincinnati has a huge opportunity. This is the biggest game in Cincinnati's program. I don't know how long. I seriously don't know how long. Moving on, Big 12, you're going to have Oklahoma, right? They're still 4-0, but I'm not buying them. I gave them one more week with the West Virginia game. Their offense still looked anemic. It's 4 weeks into the season. You nearly lose to Tulane. They turn out to be not very good. I'm really not buying Oklahoma. Texas, very kind of streaky. They lost to Arkansas. We're going to get to Arkansas in a second. Excuse me, when we get to the SEC. But Texas is what they are. I think they're a 2 or 3 loss team. Very little chance of making the playoff already with 1 loss. Iowa State already has 2 losses. Baylor is 4-0. It was an impressive win they had last week. I'm really not buying them, though, at this point. And then Oklahoma State is 4-0, but they have some really ugly wins. That's why they're all the way down at 38th here at 4-0. You see teams at 2-2 ahead of them. How about West Virginia, 2-2 ahead of 4-0 Baylor, according to FPI? Who knows? But Big 12, you're looking at Oklahoma, but really, I see right now I'm looking at the overall playoff picture. I see 0 teams clearly from the ACC, and the Big 12 is kind of teetering right now with possibly 0 teams. Oklahoma is undefeated. I know that. It'd probably take them 2 losses not to make it. But if they get 1 loss and they don't look good throughout the season, the SEC lovers are going to start making arguments for their 1-loss teams. That'll be interesting. The Big 10. Looking at this conference, you've got Ohio State still first. Guys, I'm not going to say every Ohio State snap, but the coaching is not there. Ohio State, by far, is the most talented team in the Big Ten. It's not arguable, so the FPI is still going to have them first because it's a computer ranking system, 4th overall. But the coaching is going to really hold them back. They're probably going to drop a game in Big Ten play. They already have 1 loss, which is really key. If they were undefeated, that'd be something different. But you take a look at teams like Michigan, Penn State. Michigan, I'm really concerned. So I've explained this in previous videos, but the reason they're ranked 7th in FPI and kind of, what are they, 15th in the AP poll, is because FPI really values blowout wins. And they didn't, by the way, last week they did not look good against Rutgers. They did not look good. They won 20-13. They were outgained by, I think, almost 100 yards throughout the entire game. And that's also kind of interesting because this week it's going to be fun to compare Michigan and Ohio State because Ohio State this week goes to Rutgers and faces that team. So it'll be interesting. Right now, Ohio State 15.5-point favorites. I don't know what Ohio State team we're going to get in that one, but it'll be interesting to kind of compare where Michigan's at and where Ohio State's at. With Michigan, they blew out a few teams early. The FPI values Washington more than the general public, so that was a bigger win for Michigan according to the FPI. That's why they're ranked 7th due to blowout wins. But the problem with Michigan, this is the point I want to make. The problem with Michigan, it's one-dimensional. You stop the run, they can't throw. It's a major issue, and I think they'll lose 2 or 3 games, honestly. So you can say, well, they could go make the playoffs. I'd be shocked if Michigan made the playoffs. I wouldn't be shocked if Ohio State made the playoffs. They'd have to win out, but I'd be surprised. Penn State is 4-0. So with Penn State, they still have to face Michigan. They still have to face Ohio State. They still have to face Iowa. And their resume, by the way, got nuked last week. Their 2 big wins versus Auburn. I mean, Auburn should have lost to, I think, an FCS school in Georgia State. They were handed that win by the SEC refs. It is what it is, but that was their big whiteout win that got completely wiped out. And then their other big win over Wisconsin. Wisconsin is possibly going to be falling to 1-3. That'll be an interesting game. Wisconsin-Michigan. Low scoring. It's almost like I want to think Wisconsin's going to win that game, but Graham Mertz has looked terrible. Nebraska's sitting at 2-3, kind of higher than people thought. How about FPI ranked number 26th? I saw something about Nebraska's special teams being the worst in college football and that costing them games. Like, multiple games. I don't know. Michigan State's had a great year. They're not making the playoff. Iowa's had a really nice year. I would be very surprised if they made the playoffs. They do not have a good enough offense. They simply do not. And then all the other teams, I mean, Maryland, I like Maryland a lot. They're not a playoff team. I could see them winning 8 games, going 8-4. Tua's younger brother, great quarterback prospect, great receivers on that team, bad defense, not enough talent. And then you can see the worst of the worst. How about Northwestern, 0.0 FPI, and then Illinois, the worst team in the Big Ten. So just handicapping this, I would say Ohio State's chances to make the playoffs, unlikely but possible. I'd be shocked if Michigan made it with their one-dimensional offense. Penn State, the thing with Penn State, this is really Penn State's year. You've got a veteran quarterback. You've got a good defense. You've got decent wide receivers. Jahan Dotson's a beast. It's almost like it's their year, but it's just like none of these teams, the Big Ten is solid. You take a look at the overall ranks, 4th, 7th, 15th, 11th, 21, 26, 27. It's a solid conference, but without Ohio State being that super team, I'm not seeing another team. Like, I could see the Big Ten completely being shut out on the playoff. Penn State has to go to Iowa. They have to go to Iowa. They have Michigan, and they have to go to Columbus. You think they win those 3 games? They're going to lose at least one. Iowa, I don't know Iowa's schedule, but Iowa could lose to Penn State. I mean, I don't know. It's just, to me, the Big Ten, I'm not saying you've got plenty of teams with opportunities to make the playoffs, but the talent level, I don't know. It could really cannibalize itself there, looking at the Big Ten. Moving on to, you could do Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame's making the playoffs. They're an independent. I don't see it happening. Let's move on to the Pac-12. So, guys, it's like who is going to make the playoff? It's crazy. It's so up in the air. That's why people are putting in Iowa. They're putting in Penn State because these other teams like Ohio State and Clemson are down. But the Pac-12, other than one team, I mean, UCLA had that nice start, but then they had that miserable loss a few weeks ago. I think UCLA is going to lose 3 or 4 games this year. It's one team, and it's Oregon. And the Oregon situation is really fascinating because Oregon has that huge win at Ohio State. Now, if I'm an Oregon fan, I am huge fans of Ohio State. The last thing Oregon needs is Ohio State bottoming out and losing 3 or 4 games this year and not being in the top 15 or top 20. You need Ohio State to, ideally win the Big Ten. Because Oregon has that head-to-head over Ohio State, it's an interesting scenario. Let's say Ohio State wins out. Let's say Oregon loses 1 game in conference play, but then makes the conference championship and wins out. So you have a 1-loss Ohio State Big Ten champion versus a 1-loss Oregon Big Ten champion. Ohio State would by far have the better resume, but Oregon has the head-to-head win on the road in Columbus. What an argument that is, and I think they would probably put Oregon above Ohio State if they both had 1 losses and Oregon has the head-to-head win, even though Ohio State's resume would be significantly better facing Big Ten competition. The FPI 10th, 25th, 39th. I mean, the Pac-12, my goodness. But again, this is what I was talking about with the Michigan win over Washington. Washington's only 42nd in the FPI. Most people would think, well, they're 2-2. They, lost to an FCS school week 1. They shouldn't even be in the top 75. That's why the FPI has Michigan so high, because they rate that blowout win over Washington more than the general public does. But this conference, it's Oregon or bust. The one thing I'll say, if Oregon has to win the Pac-12, they do. You can't be you can't make the Pac-12 championship game, lose that game, and still make the playoff. That's the thing. If I'm Oregon, you have the one acceptable loss you potentially have is in conference play, but you still make the conference championship and you win the conference championship, and Ohio State is still really good. So that's still a major win. That's what Oregon really needs. Oregon did a really good thing playing Ohio State. They needed that win because look at how bad the Pac-12 is. If Oregon faced 3 cupcakes non-conference play and then lost to 1 game, even if they were Pac-12 champions, a 1-loss Oregon team, they're not making the playoff with this schedule. They're just not. So that was a really good scheduling thing for them, facing Ohio State and beating Ohio State. And then, of course, we've got the SEC. And I might want to make a separate video on this, but everybody is out there saying, we don't want the same 4 teams. Well, you've got Clemson who's not going to make it. You've got Ohio State who's probably not going to make it. But be careful what you wish for, because the college football playoff this year, with Ohio State and Clemson not being in it, it could turn into an SEC cesspool, for lack of a better term. Taking a look at this, there's a huge game this weekend when it comes to the playoff. So you've got Georgia and Alabama, and again, guys, their chances to make the national championship right now are above 50. Now, I don't think that's really the case. That's a little ridiculous. But you take a look at those two teams, probably destined to make the playoff if they face each other in the SEC championship. The only thing you could say, maybe one of them has one loss, the other's undefeated. Ideally, what you would want to have happen is both of those teams have one loss going into the SEC championship, so one of them will get eliminated no matter what. The problem is Georgia does not face anyone, and this is really where I want to talk about Arkansas. So last week we had a rare situation, and it's 2 or 3 times a year it happens. It's normally always with SEC teams. It's what I like to call the battle of the overrateds. It's when two ridiculously overrated teams face each other, and the winner subsequently becomes even more overrated, right? Because they won. So I think Arkansas and Texas A&M were both way overranked, way overhyped last week, and Arkansas won. So they're going to be even more overranked and overhyped because they won against another overrated team. I'm not seeing it with Arkansas. They're probably going to, they're 18-point underdogs on the road in Georgia this week. If it was a home game, it'd be kind of cool, but they're not going to beat Georgia. They're going to be out of it. But looking at the SEC, when it comes to the playoff, you've got Georgia at this point likely making the playoff. Even if they lose to Bama in the SEC championship, they go in undefeated, they're making the playoff. Bama, this is where it gets interesting. Right now, probably making the playoff. You have Florida. It'll be an interesting, Florida, they already have one loss. They lost to Alabama. It was a close game. And then you have Ole Miss. And so really what I want to talk about here, the Ole Miss-Alabama game, I would love to see Alabama's schedule if we could, or maybe Ole Miss's schedule. Let's just quickly take a look at, see, this is the thing with my Mac. Let's just quickly, they face Ole Miss at A&M. A&M should not be ranked. I don't know why they're 15th. Easy. Arkansas, they're not going to be 8th by that time, and then easy. So, this is a bit of an issue. Let's say they lose to Ole Miss. This is the thing. They lose to Ole Miss and then win out. They're a one-loss team that doesn't make the SEC championship game. People are going to be clamoring for them to make the college football playoff. Let's say Ole Miss, I don't know what their schedule's like here. So they've got Bama, and then they get Arkansas at home. Easy. Okay, so this is a nightmare scenario. Let's say Ole Miss beats Bama. They could even lose one of these games, but they would still go to, face Georgia in Atlanta in the SEC championship game because they would have the head-to-head over Alabama. So you've got a one-loss Alabama team who does not make the SEC championship game. They're just a one-loss standalone, one-loss team. You have Ole Miss who could be undefeated or one loss. Let's say they're undefeated. This is worst case scenario. Let's say Ole Miss is undefeated going into the SEC championship game. And let's say, obviously, Georgia is undefeated. That's the nightmare scenario. We need Alabama to beat Ole Miss. And then you would hope, maybe Arkansas beats them. They're facing Arkansas at home. That's the problem. At Tennessee, that's a win. Maybe the thing is, I'm not this huge Ole Miss supporter. I don't think they're going to run the table or anything like that. Maybe Ole Miss's defense is not very good. LSU at home. LSU has not been great, but they have the talent. Auburn, they travel to Auburn. Bo Nix is a veteran, but why is Auburn ranked? These SEC, it's unbelievable. Liberty. Malik Willis, right? That'll be fun. That's just kind of a coincidence. They tried to schedule a cream puff, and Liberty's not that good, but Malik Willis is a top quarterback prospect. A&M at home. A&M season's in the tank. Vanderbilt, and then at Mississippi State. So there's a nightmare scenario right now, and with the SEC possibly getting 3 teams, and maybe I want to do an actual video on it. I don't know. Vanderbilt is horrible. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is Vanderbilt. This is something I always do this when I look at FPI. I go to the worst teams in college football because I don't know why. I'm a weird person. I just find it fun to look at this stuff. New Mexico State is still the worst team. Akron is the second worst team. Yeah, let me tell you, I've watched a lot of Ohio State games, and I'm not going to say Akron's the worst team I've ever seen Ohio State play. Maybe Florida A&M back in, I believe, 2012 with Kenny Guyton. Bowling Green back in 2016, but that Akron team is horrific. To be honest, if I were to say the worst team in college football right now, I would say UMass. But I'm sidetracked. What I wanted to do was, Right now, according to ESPN's FPI, on a neutral field, Bowling Green would be favored over Vanderbilt. I know Bowling Green got an upset against Minnesota, but I mean, just the idea of not even like the game being played where it's an upset, like just even the computers have Bowling Green on a neutral field slightly favored over Vanderbilt, an SEC team. And Vanderbilt right now is the worst Power 5 team. You can see Kansas is right there. Who else are some really bad Power 5 teams? Well, there's a big gap, isn't there? Holy crap. Florida State. Wow, Florida State's that low. California's really bad this year. Duke, yeah. I have North Carolina minus 18 against Duke. Duke is horrific. Northwestern, yeah, they're really bad this year. They're going through a crazy rebuild. Northwestern, I think, returned less overall players than Ohio State because they just had so many seniors last year. It was crazy. I didn't even know that was a thing, but is there anything else I wanted to look at? Let's look at, maybe I wanted to look at efficiencies. I want to see the special teams efficiency ranks. Is it true Nebraska is last here? There's no way. Okay, they are pretty close. I was talking to someone and they were like, dude, the Nebraska is the worst special teams, the unit I've ever seen in my life. Well, it has them like 7th last, so that's interesting. But guys, that's just a quick kind of handicap. So the ACC's out. They're done. The American, Cincinnati needs to win and win big this week. Put an exclamation point. Create your narrative. Create your narrative. You're not a Power 5. Create the narrative that you should be in the conversation. They need a big win this week. Other than that, the American's out. The Big 12, you're looking at Oklahoma right now. I think they're really the only chance to make it. They're teetering. They do have 0 losses, so they've kind of got some room for error even if they lose one game, as long as they still make the Big 12 championship game and win that, they will probably be in. But it's kind of like 50-50 they get a team in. The Big 10's kind of a mess right now. Ohio State, I would say it's unlikely. Michigan, I don't see it happening with that quarterback situation, one-dimensional offense. They do have a solid defense. I'm not seeing it happening with Michigan. They're probably going to win 8 or 9, maybe 10 games, be a very solid team that, exceeds expectations. It comes down to really Penn State, I think, and maybe Iowa. But I don't think Iowa has the offense. So the Big Ten's really up in the air right now. The Independent, it's just Notre Dame, and I don't see it happening. I've never been high on Notre Dame. They almost lost 2 games to really bad teams. How about almost losing to Florida State week 1? I understand it was a road game. There was a big crowd, but Florida State is just so bad. And then they almost lost to Toledo as well. Pac-12, it's Oregon or bust. You would think Oregon as a 1-loss Pac-12 champion, due to their non-conference win over Ohio State, as long as Ohio State doesn't bottom out and absolutely tank, as long as that win still has a lot of value, they would probably make it. The question becomes Oregon, obviously if they lose 2 games, they're out. Or if they lose the Pac-12 championship game, even if it's their only loss, they're probably out. And then the SEC guys, again, be careful what you wish for. Everyone was, saying, "Oh my God, we're so sick of Ohio State making it. We're so sick of Clemson." Well, how about 3 SEC teams? And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but at this point, it's almost a guarantee the SEC will get 2 teams in, and they're going to argue like hell if that situation plays out where Ole Miss ends up with 1 loss. You can talk about Arkansas. I don't think Arkansas has a chance, to finish the season with less than 2, maybe 3 losses. I think they're overrated. And then the whole Florida thing comes. Florida faces Georgia as well, so that's a whole nother thing. I think Georgia's going to win that game, but if Florida wins it, that's another team that's going to want to be in the playoffs. So it's a complete cluster right now when it comes to the SEC. We'll have to see what happens, guys, but we're going into week 5 now. Pretty crazy. That is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.